Hi, I'm Yinka, and this is The Hurt Locker, a podcast where we open a door into men's mental health. Come and go.
Since a certain event, I'm in grief, and I'm writing about grief, and I'm thinking about grief. The big thing in my heart locker is my son, George.
Thank you. How does it feel sharing that with our listeners?
It's always challenging to share, but it's also challenging to not share. As I mentioned, he never asked me for help. I don't know if he ever asked anybody for help. It won't save George. Might save somebody.
You're listening to The Hurt Locker, the podcast that opens the door on men's mental health. And tonight's guest, we have Nigel Linacre. Nigel, welcome to The Hurt Locker.
Thank you for having me here today, Yinka.
You're more than welcome. How has today been for you?
Today's been a day of sorting lots of administrative things in relation to some upcoming events. And
Great.
now I'm here.
Great. And it's lovely to have you here. For the benefit of our listeners and our viewers, Nigel and I met through a mutual friend last year, and we struck up a conversation. We struck up a bond. I think that's okay to say.
Yeah.
And when Nigel spoke about his experiences, I thought he would be an ideal guest for The Hurt Locker. So I'm glad we were of the same mind, Nigel, and I'm glad that you're here today.
I'm glad you're here too.
So we're going to just dive in, and I'm going to ask, for the benefit of our listeners, who is Nigel Linacre?
Well, thanks, Yinka. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm engaged in my local community. I lead a charity in an unrelated area. It's about getting water to schools mostly in Kenya, rural schools. It's called Well Boring. And since a certain event, I'm in grief, and I'm writing about grief, and I'm thinking about grief.
Thank you. Because you've mentioned grief, tell me what's in your hurt locker.
Oh. Well, maybe like many people, there have been difficult moments in my life. I can think about some really difficult times when I was an adolescent, a teenager. Father and mother were gradually, slowly separating. There was some difficult energy. There was some bullying at school, and that was a really challenging time, a very difficult time in my life. And if I come to something so much bigger than that, the big thing in my heart locker is my son, George.
Thank you. I'm pausing because I know parts of your story. How does it feel sharing that with our listeners today?
It's always challenging to share, but it's also challenging to not share. And somehow, right from day one or two or whatever, people would ask me, "How are you?" And I would say, "Terrible, just awful. Our son has died." I somehow haven't had it in me, Yinka, to not talk about it. And it's uncomfortable, but actually it's uncomfortable anyway. My life kind of is uncomfortable these days, sort of all of it.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about George.
George, my son, was a wonderful boy and man. He was a musician with a progressive rock band called Eschar, Eschar. George never said an unkind word about anybody in my hearing, ever. He was never sarcastic. He was never critical of others in any sort of unfair way. Sometimes he'd challenge, but not even much of that. And George never asked for help. Never. And he really took to his music as a bass player. That was his big thing. That was how he expressed himself. So just a lovely human being, but he couldn't do conflict with people. He never did. And if he encountered negative energy from others, he couldn't be with it, really. We thought he was shy, but after the event, his bandmates, who we talked with naturally, they said that he talked about being anxious about going back on stage again. Didn't think he could do it, because the band had stopped performing with lockdown. They'd stopped even meeting in person. You know, it's a crazy thing for us to think back to those times, right? But it all stopped. And music was his thing. And when that stopped, I think it was very, very difficult for him.
When his band members spoke about his anxiety, was that a complete shock to yourself?
It was a new word, yeah. I mean, we just hadn't thought of him being anxious. I hadn't thought of him being anxious. I thought he's shy, he's funny. Looking back, there was quite a lot of evidence that he was anxious. I didn't get it. I saw George twice in the 2 months before he died, and I didn't see it coming at all. I didn't even see anxiety. Did I see anxiety at the end? I saw him being a bit uncomfortable. Yeah.
Can you tell us the lead up to George's passing, to his suicide?
Yes, at least from my perspective, and I'd never imagined that suicide would be a thing. So George never said anything like that. But I went to see him twice because my father, his grandfather, in his early 90s was dying, had a fall and was dying. And George hadn't responded. George sometimes went completely quiet, just no response for a while. We thought that was what he wanted. And he went quiet, but with my dad dying, I thought that, that's not right. That's not right. I've got to engage. So I went to see him at his flat. And this happened twice. It happened a few weeks later, second time. I just went. He wasn't responding, and I went to see him. And I went early in the day to be pretty sure that he would be there. And it was difficult to get a response, but I got a response, and we went out for coffee. One of the 2 times we had a meal together. We talked. But I remember thinking before maybe the second of those conversations, I remember thinking, what am I going to do with this conversation? Am I just going to be nice and supportive? Or am I going to challenge him? Because he'd left his job. He said he had savings, but he'd left his job, his day job. And I remember thinking, do I need to challenge him about, what's your plan? Where are you going? I didn't. I went for the, hey, son, I'm here. Let's have coffee. How you doing? Okay, you've stopped working. What's that about? How are you managing? I was nice. It sounds perhaps an odd word. I was just friendly and supportive, and I didn't recognize any sign that he was suicidal. But you see, I hadn't done any suicide prevention training or anything like that. So So I didn't recognize any signs. I'm not saying there weren't signs, but I didn't recognize it. I didn't see it. I thought, okay, here we are. We've had coffee. We've had a sort of brunch thing together. He's okay. I'm okay. He knows I care. He knows I'm really interested. What else to do?
And it strikes me listening to you talking that you don't appear to be a confrontational type of family. You may ask questions and maybe draw out, elicit a response, but there was no corners to hide or anything like that.
I think that's right. We're not confrontational. My wonderful, and as I mentioned, late father was confrontational in his life, and I didn't want to bring that into our space, into our family. So we got on, but I think George found ways of hiding, really, or of hiding how he was feeling. He was good at being even a bit secretive, or at least just not giving you full disclosure, and he really didn't.
Do you say that with the benefit now of hindsight?
Yeah, absolutely. With the benefit of hindsight, I can see that. I can see that George probably imagined that if he'd told me he was really low, that I would have tried to help him. I would have tried to fix it. I would have said, "Come home with us for some months, and we will, we'll sort this out." In other words, I would have gone into doing mode, right?
Okay.
Not into being with him, not into deeply being with him. And I think by the time I saw him the second time, maybe even the first time, he'd pretty much decided. That's a speculation. I don't know. It was in his mind, I think, pretty sure. And I think that he might have thought that if he'd shared with me and then he did it anyway, that he would have made me somehow more, it would have been an even bigger failure somehow if I was aware. And but I think also he didn't like having difficult conversations.
You've used that word failure.
Yeah. I feel
I'm imagining, as a father myself, we apportion blame sometimes for what occurs with our children and that. But do you sincerely see that as a failure on your part?
It feels like a colossal failure to lose a son, I suppose daughter, but here I am, lost a son, to suicide. It's not exactly the same as actual blame, but it's definitely not success. It's like,
I accept that.
It has felt, and still to some degree feels like a colossal failure. Far and away biggest failure of my life is how it feels. Now we could argue, we could debate the extent to which it was. Could I have known? Could I have got it? But I've done, since George died, I've done lots of things, and one of the things I've done is suicide prevention training. And if I came across someone who said what George said, I would have been alert to it. There's stuff I would notice and pick up now that I didn't pick up before.
Talk me through the training that you had. Where were those eureka moments in the training?
Great question. So the first thing is, if someone hasn't yet taken their life, if they haven't actually taken their life, they probably aren't like 100% committed. They could change at any moment. It is possible. And indeed, people who are suicidal may be feeling suicidal one day and not the next day, and then suicidal again the next day. So there's some great language. I went through the ASIST, ASIST training.
Yes. The applied suicide
it.
skills training, yes.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good stuff. But so if you can you're having conversation with somebody and they're going, whatever they're going, this is really hard. Then the thing to do is to ask them, have you sometimes been having thoughts about suicide? If they're not thinking about suicide at all, you won't be like making them suicidal, because they'll respond and go, no, I'm just having a bad day.
Yes.
But if they are suicidal, almost, very likely you bring it up, they will go something like, yes, or how'd you know? Like, yeah. And then because they're in and out of feeling more or less suicidal, you can contract with them. It has to be an agreement with them. Look, if sometimes you're feeling, and I won't do justice to the training, it's kind of like, go do the training if anybody's interested in it. But it's like, if you're sometimes feeling suicidal and sometimes not, then we need to keep you safe when you're feeling suicidal, so that you can get through to the bit where you're not suicidal, right?
Absolutely.
We need to work on a plan together for how that can run.
I'm talking post training.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what that acquisition of knowledge was like for you. I'm going to put it in my Yinka's words, and your son, it's like the horse is bolted, as it were, and then you're learning the training.
Yeah. Too late, right? Too late. But since George died, I mean, well, to start with, I was just in extreme shock. But in moving past that shock, the extreme shock, so there's still some shock. There's probably still some shock even now. But I've been trying to do what I can in this space. It won't save George. Might save somebody. And when it comes to grief work, it's not gonna like make grief easy, but it might make it more kind of copable. So I've been trying since I lost George to make up for losing George. And of course it's impossible. He's gone. But my work in this space is to try and make a difference in this space that I knew nothing about. 4 and a bit years ago, I just knew nothing about this at all. And I generally have had such a sort of, positive, enthusiastic approach that if somebody had said, hey, come and do some, get engaged with suicide stuff, it wouldn't have been me, Yinka. I wouldn't have got to it, and I didn't.
Since the training, since George's passing, have you supported others who've been suicidal? Have you even asked the suicide question? Have you found yourself in that situation?
Yes. And really, I mean, kind of bizarrely, within a week or two of George dying, I heard 2 people say that they were suicidal. The first one knew absolutely nothing about George, but this person started saying that they were. And we had a conversation, and the other one, they were, I just heard them going past our house, saying something like, all right, then I'll top myself into the phone. And I went outside and I went after him. I called and said, hey, hello. And this person, they stopped second time and they turned around and then they started walking back. And then this person said, you're George Linacre's dad. And we stayed in touch for some time. We had some sessions. We had some sessions together. There's been more since. And I think because I've been so public about it, most people know. Most people know, if they know anything about me, they know about my son going, and they know about the suicide, and some of them talk.
So it's interesting. Some of them talk. Do some avoid?
Well, I'm sure that's the case, and it's still a challenge. I was trying to deeply get where George had got to, after he'd gone, and I still couldn't get it, and then I was able to remember that when I was 14, approaching my 15th birthday, I was in a really difficult place. I mentioned earlier, some teenage times were really difficult, and I decided that I would die the day before my next birthday. And I wrote it down. And I didn't do anything further, right? Something must have shifted or changed or whatever, right? I wasn't taking any actual action apart from writing it down, but I could remember exactly how I felt. I could remember the whole thing, and I'd forgotten about it entirely, right? I'd repressed the memory. It was just absolutely gone from me. Hadn't thought about it in decades at all. But I was able to remember that, and in fact, the how I was at that time would provide the lyrics for a song, which is called "Just One Word."
We'll come on to.
Yeah, sure.
We'll come on to that in a bit. George passed away 4.5 years ago. How old was George?
George was 32, and he died on the 19th of November, 2021.
32. And prior to that, you have no indication that he'd ever sought out any support for his mental health, or he was even struggling?
I had no indication that he'd done any of those things, and indeed his medical records hadn't moved to where he was then living, and where he'd been living in that area for over 10 years. It looks as though he never went to a doctor. I don't know if he ever called anybody, but it wasn't in keeping. He didn't, as I mentioned, he never asked me for help. I don't know if he ever asked anybody for help.
Can I ask about your wife and yourself? How have you managed? Because sometimes it can be the breaking of marriages, the breaking of families, etc. How have you managed and coped?
Well, I can only really speak from my perspective. Where it seems, I mean, we this was worse than all the worst things, the bad things that have happened in my life, added together and multiplied by the biggest number you could think of, right? I mean, the shock is just off the scale.
Absolutely.
There's nothing else that is like 1% of the scale of the shock and the hurt and the wounding. So it's been really hard, and yeah, I've come across people whose marriages have then gone as well, and of course, in some cases their work has gone. Pretty much everything. We've just stayed, and I think that throwing myself into work in this space. I mean, when I started, I didn't want to live, so it wasn't about, oh, I'll do this work and that will help me feel better. But not turning away from the grief, like just really facing it and staying with it and writing about it and singing about it, has been a kind of torture. But also, I think it's been profoundly helpful.
Did you at any time yourself contemplate suicide?
Not since I was a teenager, but I know that because I've got these lyrics that I mostly wrote in 2022, and there's a lyric to the song "Bring Him Back" where it goes, "What can be said to death? Take him not, take me. On this let us swiftly agree, but do not dismiss a father's plea." I'm saying take me. I mean, really, really, really take me. Just take me. But bring him back. That's got to be the deal, right? That's got to be the deal. Which I know is completely impossible, right? I know it's completely impossible, but still, I'd be like,
how you feel.
Bring him back.
This is how you feel.
Yeah.
Can we turn to what I consider your opus, your response to that grief in terms of the grief opera. Tell us a little bit about the grief opera itself. Before, I've read some feedback, some comments. People have described it as brave, compassionate, beautifully realized,
Yeah.
moving and utterly compelling. Tell me about the grief opera.
Well, looking back, I can see where it started. It started with George's funeral. Two of our three surviving children, all adult children, they said they were going to do the eulogy, right? So I'm going, okay, so I'm not doing the eulogy, but I've written poetry, and so I thought I'll write a poem about George. I'll just write about George in the form of a poem, and it came fairly easily, and I said it at the funeral. And then I kept writing about George. Well, I wrote about our last conversations. I was, trying to remember, what did he actually say? What did I say? Of course, I didn't record the conversations. But, what did he say? What did I miss? So I was writing about George, writing about our last conversation, writing about him in poetic form. And I thought it would maybe become a grief memoir. I've written a few books over the years, and I thought it would be a book. I've written books, this could be a book. But then I'm walking in the park one day, and the words the grief opera just come into my mind like bang, they're there. And so I Google the grief opera. There's no such thing. And then I call Vladimir Miller, who's a wonderful jazz pianist and classical composer who I'd done some work with. And he said, music is a salve for grief. And he said he would work on whatever words I gave him and see if we could turn it into a musical with this title, the grief opera. And so I kept writing, and my late father's widow, who has some knowledge of writing and poetry and all of this, she said, right now, just write everything while it's raw. And so I did, and we came up with about 20 songs of grief, songs of loss, and then we had to see if we could perform it, if people would come and perform it with us, and what response we would get, and when we first performed it, for the very first show, most people were friends who had come along to support me, really. And they were like silent throughout the whole thing until 100% standing ovation at the end. But people who come now are mostly people who know something of loss. And so to them, it isn't shocking in the way that it was to my friends. It isn't shocking. They already know it. It's giving them language. It's giving them a way of going, right, there it is, kind of the same as me in some ways. And there this guy is. He's still living, breathing, expressing himself. Some people say it's given them hope that they can keep going, that they can find a way through grief. And I'd like to sort of, it would be a neat story if I simply said, hey, I wrote this so that people could find their way through grief, but I didn't have any purpose in mind at all, Yinka. I just wrote it because it had happened. I wrote about George because he'd gone. I wrote about our conversations because I tried to make sense of them. I wrote about my grief because it was such a strange thing to encounter. If you, and I know you know something about this, if you move from not knowing grief to like big grief, or whatever we should call it, it's a hell of a shock. Yeah, it's a hell of a shock.
There's an authenticity, a vulnerability, a rawness and a nakedness when you listen to it, you bear all, you bear your soul within it.
Yes.
There's no question there.
Okay.
I'm just.
Yeah,
You
no,
know.
it's true, Yinka, and the grief has changed me. So in the past, before George died, I would probably try and manage conversations so that they're productive and helpful and get to a
I'm
conclusion.
smiling because you're very good at that. I'm smiling at that, and go on, continue.
Well, but what I want to say now, and what I want to say, and it might not be 100% true. What do we really know our own truth is? I think with George's death, in some sense, I've given up pretending.
Yes.
I've given up pretending.
Yeah.
Hey,
Absolutely.
It's all fine. It's okay. I can't do it. I don't see any merit for this. Any merit. It's just how it has to be now. I can't close it down. I can't switch it off. I can't go, hey, let's have some fun now and blah de blah. Yeah, we're here in pain, right?
Yeah.
Big change for me. If somebody would have been in pain, if I would have seen somebody in pain or grief or something before, I would probably have just done, the usual thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss, and then moved on, right? That many people do that, right? Because we don't know how to work with people in grief.
Absolutely.
And that's the same for pain. And we have a society that is death avoidant.
100%.
It's grief avoidant. It's even like sadness avoidant, right? We're supposed to be happy. And this is...
But are we really?
Yeah. No, well, of course, it's crazy. It's crazy because we're not, right? But then when we know we're not happy and we think we're supposed to be happy, then that could be really bad, because then we might think, oh, well, the problem must be me. I'm not happy. I did a little book about happiness about 15, 18 years ago or something like this. And it was not a terrible book, but the point of life is not to be happy. It's really not it. The point of life is not to have a lot of pleasure. It really isn't. It can't be, right? This is just so selective and limited, and the darkness of life is part of life.
Yes.
And if we deny it, we're missing out on the really profound stuff, the really big stuff. We're just, surfing. We're just surfing life on a, I'm happy, I'm fine, I'm eating candy floss and sugar all the time. It's not the worst thing in the world, right? But you won't get profound growth. You won't deepen your understanding of life just by focusing on the nice and comfortable stuff. And clearly, Yinka, with the Hurt Locker, you don't do that.
How have you changed?
Well, first of all, I know that my experience of being is radically different. So how life feels to me when I'm in it, doing it, being here is radically different. I have still quite a lot of sort of like a sadness as a background hum. It's just sort of here. And I'm quite likely to well up. I'm well up most days at one thing or another, sometimes with joy, sometimes with sadness. I think that I'm more interested in being. I'm interested in being as well as doing. So if I can be with people, I serve on, there's an organization, Survivors of Bereavement by Suicide, and I serve on its support line.
Great.
SOBS, exactly. And that's huge. That's just massive, where people are. And, they might have lost somebody years ago or days ago.
Yes.
And I want to be there for these people. I really want to be there for these people. And I'm just not pain avoidant. Also most things in life that aren't big seem really small now. So it doesn't kind of get me in the way that it used to. And I to give a balanced picture, I think I experience more emotion. I experience a lot more emotion. For some time, I have been aware of the heart as a center of feeling.
Okay.
It's an extraordinary thing. And I had this career as a coach before lockdown, and some people thought were very happy that I was their coach. But one thing I noticed in working with groups and quite a lot of people is that many people, maybe most people, aren't aware of the heart as a center of feeling. It's just not there.
Can you unpick that more to explain that for a layman like myself, what you mean?
Right. So we can be aware of feelings. We can put our hand in water and be aware that it's hot or it's cold. We can be aware that we're tense or we're calm or somewhere between the two. We can be aware that our gut is tight or loose or whatever, and that can be, physically located. We can be aware that our thinking is going faster or slower. And we can also, everyone can, with practice, I believe, tune into the heart as a center of feeling, just as the gut is. We pretty much all know that the gut can get a bit tight when we're nervous or something, right? So we know that we know about gut feel, right?
Yes.
They talk about gut feel. Same with the heart. And I've become aware, I want to say, Yinka, that I'm not always aware of it, but I now believe that love in the broadest sense, like love,
Yes.
not love for like one thing. Love is here all the time. Love is here all the time. And love wants to express itself as love. And if we can just let go of all the other stuff of I'm no good, this is hard, they don't like me. I've had those thoughts a million times, right? So, but if we can let go of all that and just be present and allow and sort of surrender to the moment, then love comes up. And this isn't just happy love.
No.
Because love includes sorrow.
Of course.
Love, if you imagine love, what would love feel about the state of our world and our lives? There'd be some sadness in there.
A lot of sadness.
Yeah. And I think the bit that hasn't entirely changed is I'm still pretty driven to accomplish things that make a powerful difference. That bit went after George died for a while, but I've reconnected with that. I've been working most recently on a model of grief, and you start in disorientation, but at some point you want to get to a reorientation, right, where you're moving forwards in some sense. Again, you're changed. You lose the person. I lost the person I was.
Yeah.
I lost some of me. I lost George, and in losing George, I lost the world as I experienced it. The big happy family, all of us, like gone. However, now sometime later, I can go, well, actually, yeah, I lost George, but now, and this might sound a bit crazy, I have a relationship with George. I can think of George. I can feel George. I can imagine George is here. Whether or not George is experiencing anything, I don't know, right? But I can feel all of that. Indeed, George feels closer to me than when he lived 80 miles away. Right? I've thought about him more than anybody else in the past 4 years. I've talked to him in my right. So actually, it looks like I lost George entirely. Now, have I lost George entirely? So I accept that I don't have the relationship I had with him, but I have a relationship with George, whether or not George has a relationship with me.
Absolutely.
And I've lost the person that I had, but I've now discovered a different version of me that actually is more sensitive, less unloving, still make mistakes, more considerate of others. Not that I was like wildly inconsiderate, but I'm more sensitive, right? So I have a new version of me, and my world as it was is gone, but I'm now in a world where we, because it's more than just me in our family, are doing work where we're trying to be really helpful in these difficult spaces of suicide prevention and of grief. And maybe we're doing some good, right? So I lost everything, and yet life goes on, and it's different. And this is not 100% terrible. You know, if you become a better person, if you become less unloving, more loving, this is not bad. Now I want to say, I don't want any of that. I just want George back. It's not like, hey, George went, that was terrible, but look at all these good things that have happened. It isn't that. I still want George back. But given that it has happened, it can't stop there. It can't stop there. I have to, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I've realized that I absolutely needed to create something meaningful from his death, right? Some beautiful things that wouldn't otherwise have happened.
Would you describe it as post-traumatic growth? Or some may describe it as that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I came across the words, right? You won't find post-traumatic growth in any of my lyrics, because it's like a bit technical. But yeah, trauma's terrible. There's nothing good about trauma, but after trauma, what are our lives about? What would a good life look like? These sorts of questions we tend to not think about, like maybe ever, until and unless some big thing comes along, right?
Yes.
But then if we face some big things like, okay, he's gone, what? This could happen again with somebody I know. Maybe I should get some training and get into this, right? This grief has been hell. It's hell for others. Maybe I can create something that would help a bit in that space. I mean, my thinking isn't that sort of simple, but there's a sort of general feeling of, I have to create some really cool things so that, all right, George went. George must have been really struggling, and George went, and I'm really sorry about all of that. And somehow, out of his death, some beautiful things have come, which doesn't make up for it. It's not okay. I still want to wind back the tape to the 19th of November and do this again. And straight after it happened, it felt like I'm just on a film set. Somebody's got the wrong script. It can't be. So I know it can be. I know it was hell. I know it's hell for many others. But there is the possibility of some growth in future, not immediately.
Yes.
I was with some people recently, and I said, husband and wife, and they've just had their first anniversary of losing their son. And I said the first year is utter hell, and the second year is likely to be hell.
Yes.
I'm not making little of it. I'm not saying, hey, all you need to do is go write an opera, and things will get better. But at some point as we go along, it's great if you can find a way to give back. You're struggling, but find a way to give back.
Absolutely. May I ask, how was George's siblings coped? How have they coped, and have you found yourself being overprotective and being direct and asking them about how are you doing? How's your mental health? Are you struggling? Can you talk to me, etc.?
We have it's a great question, Yinka. We my wife and I have and indeed our surviving son and daughters have a much greater awareness. We all have a much greater awareness about this. At the same time, I kind of felt that we were all running on an empty tank, right? Our ability to help one another, we're all wounded, really, and it's really hard. And what they've done variously, and what they've done with their life since has been just amazing. Actually, they've been making their own contributions, and our surviving son and one of our two daughters have had kids since Lyra Georgie and Oscar George. And that's beautiful. And that gives us something. I mean, I'm absolutely not saying that suicide isn't it's a terrible, terrible thing. And, I'd really like to do what I can to get that number down to 0. I mean, absolutely 0. But it's possible to turn your grief into something. It is possible to make a difference in the world, even when you're in grief. And actually you become, I've said this to some people on the sob support line, I hope appropriately, I say something like, having heard everything, a lot of what they've been through, I said, you've had profound life experience. And when you're ready, that's something that can be really helpful to others. Right.
Agreed.
I think we have to not exactly embrace the darkness, but we if you go through this sort of thing, you know something about awful darkness, and repressing it, pushing it away isn't going to work.
No.
But if you're with it, then you'll discover stuff. You'll discover, well, it's really hard, and you'll discover that somehow life goes on.
Yes. And I think in terms of when you mentioned the darkness, I think that's where we need to shine the light on.
Yeah, we do. This might sound obvious, right? But there are millions of people struggling in this country alone. The countless millions across the world. They are struggling. Life is super hard. They don't know what to do about it. They don't see obvious support. And then we have a lot of us who don't know how to support them that well. So this is not great.
No, it's not.
But, the old English stiff upper lip and sort of, let's just move on. It doesn't cut it, right? It really doesn't cut it. And I want to be, and to some extent I can see that it's happening, I want to be a person that people can bring their pain to.
How does that feel for you, that in spite of what you've experienced, people feel comfortable to come, to talk, to open up to you?
Yeah, well, for me, it's like if somebody comes to me with a lot of pain, it's like, well, I'm here and I'll feel it and it will resonate. And actually, I'm not feeling any worse because I already have pain. I've already got pain, and I'm not like avoiding pain. And actually, it's an honor. Honor's not quite the right word. I don't really want to say privilege because that has other baggage, but it's somehow it might just sound really awful being with people who are really in a very difficult place, but actually it feels beautiful. It feels beautiful. It feels extraordinary to just be. Well, at a recent performance of the Grief Opera, there was a team there from the Samaritans, and I was just talking with them, before the show, and they have similar sort of,
Yes.
If we could just learn to not turn away from our pain, if we could learn to be with it and to be with it with one another, there's a possibility of it being transformed.
Holding the unbearable.
Holding the unbearable. If we'll do that, there's the possibility of transformation.
Absolutely.
And I want to give slightly enigmatic thing, but life is about transformation, actually.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Nigel, who's there for you? I know you'll probably say, I know you're going to say your family, your children, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But it's a genuine question. Who is there for you?
Yeah. There are 2 or 3 guys who live quite nearby, and I will go out for a walk with one of them most days, and we talk. And it's one day it might be me going through all of whatever. Another walk it might be whoever I'm walking with, right? So we are, as it happens, they're all male, and we're able to just be with one another, to talk it through. But all of the three that I'm thinking of have had huge challenges in recent years. Not the same, but huge challenges. And I think if we can be there for one another, I mean, it's kind of like obvious, right? We need to be there for one another, and not just be there for the people we really like, who are like part of our group. Not that, not the ones that we think are super cool on, I don't know, Instagram or whatever. Not that. Actually be there for anyone who we come across who may be struggling. Why the hell not, right?
Absolutely. And I'm guessing that therefore that because time is limited, time is of a premium, then the conversations that we have got to have meaning, have got to have purpose, because we may not see that person ever again.
Right. Exactly right. If we treated every conversation like it could be a big conversation, it could be meaningful to them in a way we might not even know for sure. But if you can bring, this will sound like a cliche, it's around, right? I've heard it. If you can bring your whole self, well, this is just being open. This is just being here. I'm a fool. I make mistakes. I've let people down from time to time in my life. All of that stuff, right? And yet I can be with people who are really in difficulty, and that's somehow beautiful and potentially transformatory. And we can all do that. We can. And it's a sort of one thing you have to do, which I didn't know about, is you have to drop the "I'm going to fix you" approach, right? It's not like I'm going to fix you. How could you begin to know what's really going on in another human being? But you could be with them. You could be open. You could be open-hearted, and just be with them, whoever they are. And probably they'll get that. Probably they'll get you. Probably they'll get you that you're not trying to do anything to them. Yes. You're just there, and you feel something of their pain or discomfort. And you're not like making cheap little jokes and gags and things that help you to avoid serious stuff. And I kind of want to say that this work, in a way, it's really important work. But once you're sort of in the groove of it, it's liberating, right? This doesn't drag me down at all.
No.
When I'm with people who are really in great difficulty, it doesn't drag me down. I'm with them. Good. We're there. We feel pain. And afterwards, the phone call finishes or whatever, I can take a breath and just kind of go, wow, there we are. That was something. That was a big moment.
You're bringing the grief opera to Liverpool.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I want to say something about the grief opera itself. There's a lot of jazz. It's kind of more like a musical. There's some difficult stuff in there, but there's some upbeat, encouraging, inspirational, positive stuff as well in the grief opera. And if you could come through something like what I've been through and come out in a positive, beautiful way at the end, then this is like amazing. I sing in it. I'm a competent singer, but we have some great singers. We have an international opera star who decided to join us. He just gives his time, just utterly fantastic. We several other members of the group have lost a daughter, a brother, a son. So we know about grief, and we're bringing it to Liverpool, which I've wanted to do for some time. As you know, Yinka, I don't sound remotely like I'm from Liverpool, but my father was.
Yes.
And the Linacres, my surname is part of Bootle, right? This is where we're from. So this feels like a huge moment for me to come along. The music that Vladimir Miller created is absolutely fantastic. It's really poignant, sometimes dark, ultimately uplifting. The words, lots of lyrics, some poetry, are as real as I think they could be, right? It's absolutely come from where I've been on this journey. So this is authentic, and the audience will hear me singing of pain and of transformation, and of others as well. So it will be beautiful and potentially life-changing for anyone who knows loss. And for people who don't know loss, it's going to be like, wow, it's going to be like, whoa, there is loss. Now I know a bit about loss, right? So either you don't know about loss and you're going to get what loss is in this kind of dramatic way, and it will be a kind of education. And if you know loss, it is likely to resonate and cause you to feel you're heard, spoken to and heard, and that we are deeply in this together. We just are, right? We just are. What were we thinking? This has also changed me, you know, in terms of, if you like, another word, social philosophy, right? I mean, I used to, you know, put some sort of a premium on markets and competition to drive up standards and things. And I'm not saying that's all nonsense, but caring for one another and being with one another is the personal priority.
Yes, yes. The grief opera itself is taking place at the Unitarian Church, Ullet Road, 57 Ullet Road, on Saturday, the 9th of May.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Like, when is it? Where is it? How can I get to it? I have no idea. Yes, Saturday, 9th of May, Unitarian Church. It's going to be fantastic, and good idea to get tickets in advance if you possibly can, to be sure that you get in okay, but probably some people will be able to get in on the door, I would think. So It's going to be good.
And if people do want to buy tickets, where can they purchase them?
If you go to the Grief Opera, all one word, .org, you can click there and the Liverpool event will come up, and you can click, and, you know, it's like 10 quid or something. And if you really can't afford it, find a way to let me know and you can come anyway, right? Because this is important, vital.
This is important.
Yeah.
Nigel, I know you said you've watched or listened to The Hurt Locker a couple of times, but if I asked you who's the most important person in your life and you can only pick one person, who would you say?
Well, that is such a huge question. I think I'm going to have to say my wife, Sue. You know, we're here. I haven't always been the easiest person to be with. She's amazing. And then I also want to say, alongside her, I'm breaking the rule, I want to say George, who lived a beautiful life because, as I mentioned earlier, he was just always kind, always thoughtful, never negative about anything or anybody. But, you know, the last song in the Grief Opera I mentioned earlier is just one word, and it's about asking for help.
Yes.
And if anyone out there needs help, there are lots of us who want to help, really, really, really want to help, right? 100% non-judgmentally. If anybody wants to track me down, I mentioned earlier that most days I'm working for the water charity that we set up, which bores wells mostly in Kenya, East Africa, and it's called Well Boring. Anyway, my number's on that website somehow. And I'll be happy to hear from anyone who's struggling, from anyone who has some feedback, some thoughts, wants to connect in some way. I'm here.
Thank you for being on The Hurt Locker. We're going to finish in a moment. You close your phone, your laptop. You've had your dinner, your supper, and there's a knock at the door, and it's 11-year-old Nigel. What do you say to him?
Keep going. There will be difficult moments. Sometimes you won't see a way forward at all, but a way forward will emerge in time. And the hardest times will be the times of potentially the greatest learning. So you will get somewhere. keep going, keep learning, and keep loving.
Nigel Linacre, you've been an excellent host, guest even. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inka, and thanks for all the work you do in this space. Fantastic.
It's a team effort. We all do it. It's a team effort. And that's a wrap, Tim.
The Hurt Locker is a safe space for our guests to openly share their mental health experiences. If you have been affected by any of the content in this recording, then please reach out for support. If it is an emergency, dial 999. If you would like to talk to somebody today, then please call the Samaritans on 116 123. Stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Hurt Locker. Please give us a rating or share with another listener. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Hurt Locker Pod.